challenges for third culture kids, how can we minister to them? It's like, what can we do? Because we know as a pastor we can't do everything, but there are some things we can do. And these are sort of thought provokers. They're like, and one of the books for display is one of the premier books about third culture kids. He was a third culture kid. In fact, we've met him, Nancy and I. Anyway, note that all third culture kids are not missionary kids. Diplomat kids are all third culture kids are not missionary kids. Diplomat kids are third culture kids often. Military kids can be third culture kids. It's not a term unique to missionary kids who spend their developing years in a third culture. So, and all missionary kids are not third culture kids. If you're a missionary in the culture where your parents spent their developing years, you're not. So why should we care? Here it is. Sending churches are stewards of missionaries. Sending churches are stewards of a missionary. And let me encourage you, Pastor, if you don't have a missionary sent from your church, don't apologize. Don't be embarrassed. But pray for God to give you a missionary to practice on. And I mean learn on by practice. To learn to be a sending church. You just pray that routinely. God, please send us a missionary that we can learn from them how to be a sending church. God's going to send you one because many, many missionaries feel that's lacking in their life. They have somebody who claims to be their sending church, but they're not really very connected or ministering to them. Supporting church are stewards of missionary dollars. So that's why we should care. So here's if you come across a missionary that's struggling, and you know one. You may not know it, but you know one. No question. We will not criticize their sending church. We will not criticize their sending pastor. We will not undermine their relationship with their mission board. That's not necessary. But if we can be of any ministry to them, we would be glad to. Nancy and I have a Zoom call Wednesday morning. Opening call to a missionary, not with our agency, that we have never met in person. Her opening comment to us in our first Zoom call, quote, "I am a mess," end quote. And a good person, doing a good work. And by the way, Pastor, you pray the Lord will send you somebody to minister to just like that, a missionary. Okay, so here's some ideas. And I'm just going to bounce over these for the sake of time because I really want Rodney to have his full amount of time. So understand, being a third culture kid is not all a down negative experience. So don't get that impression. If I've created that, there are a lot of upsides to being a missionary kid, a third culture kid. You could take the average third culture kid, 10 years old, the majority of them, way more than the majority. And you could say to them, in Africa, this is your ticket. You're going to Los Angeles. You're going to connect in Amsterdam and New York. And the average third culture kid would say, okay. They've done it many times following their mom or dad. The airline probably not going to let you do that, but there are a lot of upsides, cultural understanding, language, all those things. So we don't want to create the idea that, you get TCK stamped on your forehead, and for the rest of your life, it's like a birthmark that everybody's staring at. There are a lot of upsides. Number two, good to educate yourself about third culture kids. There are excellent books. There are excellent podcasts. Pastor, I was a pastor. I know you cannot be an expert on everything, but just a little bit, if you don't have it already, and you may, a little bit broader understanding of third culture kids. Just reading that book one time will just give you in ministry kids, because a lot of the issues are the same. The difference is when you grow up in a third culture, it's like on steroids, those issues. Number three, and you may have some of these things all down pat, develop a loving, non-judgmental attitude toward ministry kids in general and missionary kids in particular. And especially if you're the parent of young kids. When I didn't have any kids, I was an expert at it. I could tell you all about kids and teens. We didn't have any, but I knew it all, Then I got a few, and I still knew it all when I could get them to do. Now I realize, I didn't really know very much. And none of us need to apologize. It's a challenging thing today, and different, more so than it was once upon a time. But missionary kids, and you probably have a non-judgmental attitude, but some people are pretty hard on ministry kids. Like, aren't you the preacher's kid? Number 4, we need to develop a realistic versus a romanticized understanding of missions and missionaries. You know those stories of the missionary heroes of the past? And there's some amazing ones. My favorite missionary biography, To the Golden Shore, Adoniram Judson, a breathtaking book. There's so many. Gladys Aylworth's story. But sometimes people who don't understand missionary care, they don't understand our ministry very well. They might say something like, well, you know, William Carey didn't need missionary care. Adoniram Judson didn't need missionary care. Hudson Taylor, they say, he didn't need missionary care. That's not true. None of that is true. We just don't write biographies, most people, that tell that side of the story. And that side of the story is not that they were bad people. It was that there's another side to the story. And they're called hagiographies. That's a real word. And it describes a book that accentuates virtues. Doesn't talk about the other side of the story. Number 5, a bit repetitious, develop a different but not wrong attitude towards those outside our culture. By different, we usually mean better. But the word I was looking for is the word ethnocentrism. It's there, you know, about only your whole cultural understanding is right there in front of you. Number 6, we need to admit that what we don't know and what we don't know that we don't know. This is really challenging to a missionary. Some pastor contacts them, and pastor, I'm not speaking ill of you. I'd like to come to the mission field, visit. Well, let me back up. Do you know that most missionaries don't want mission trip teams to come visit them? Do you agree with that?
I agree with that, except for missionaries who have built their reputation around hosting groups and get a lot of, and that is really kind of their half or their major ministry.
Yeah. Can I say it to you?
Finances and for the fame.
Can I say it to you this way? It's their bread and butter. Having missionary trips come for all the not so good reasons necessarily. The other side of it is missionary, it's time consuming, it costs money. They don't quite understand why would you spend all this money to have a group of teens come, do something they don't do at home, in a place they don't speak the language, on somebody else's dime. And nationals look at it worse. But they don't complain about it because, after all, they're going to get their wall painted. So they say, well, hey, they'll paint my wall, let them paint my wall. Even many pastors, the mission trip we experience is a very romanticized trip because the missionary doesn't want you to have a bad time. And it's kind of too bad. Sometimes we pastors go on a missionary trip. We're there one time, and we preach, and there's 100 people there, and we say, so if you raise your hand. Do you know that in many cultures, they don't know what came between if you and raise your hand? They don't know that. They don't care about that. And you might say, well, that sounds like manipulation. No, it could be hunger, poverty. You're white, so you're rich, and you just, if you offered them something, what do you want me to do? Raise my hand. Pastor goes home, this is amazing. I went there, never been there before, preached one time, and 100 people were there, and 100 got saved. Now, I need to start a ministry of going there every 3 months. Because after all, no one got saved there with our missionary till I got there. Now, I'm not depreciating anything that's positively accomplished by a pastor on a mission trip, but even the missionary knows all that's not true. He knows you misunderstood it. He knows you shouldn't have said some of the things you said to unintentionally mislead the people. But the missionary trip that's great, missionary, we'd like to come visit you. Will that work for you? Would you like us to come? Missionary, it's going to be me and my wife or a mature couple from our church. We do not need to stay with you, but you need to help us figure out the logistics of transportation. We're only going to be there a few days. We don't need to do any sightseeing. We don't need any fancy meals. We just want to come and see you, say hi to you, look you in the eye, pray with you, hear some of your story. We're not going to repeat your story. Most missionaries would welcome that if it was built around their convenience. The missionaries scheduled that. So I said that at a table talk in Lebanon, Rodney's home church here a couple years ago. The next year, here comes the pastor. He said, I did it. I said, what'd you do? He said, I went on a mission trip. And he described, and we're not taking the credit. Like you could tell me how you did something that was successful and I followed it. Well, you don't really get the credit. I don't want it. We don't need any credit. But his face, how that ministered to the missionary. We were with another missionary, my wife and I, who were the pastor, and said to the pastor over lunch, because since we live in Florida, we have loads of people come visit in Florida. And he said in the course of the conversation, yeah, our missionary got to the field, and after they'd been there less than maybe about 6 months, the missionary they're going to work with announced they were leaving. Everyone on the field knew it. The new missionary did not. He wasn't told. The guy you're going to work with, he's leaving. He's not staying. Everyone else knew it. Pastor and his wife were having lunch, and he told me that, and I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, well, guess what? He said, what? I said, you need to go visit him. And he said, yeah, I am not too much for strange foods. And I said, Pastor, he's a friend. Pastor, you need to go visit him. This is a big thing's been dumped on him. He's going to tell you he can handle it, but it's a big thing. He was betrayed. Not maliciously necessarily, but he was betrayed. Now he's there. Well, I'm not really too much for, I said, Pastor, I'm just telling you, you need to go. Lo and behold, whatever, Nancy, a couple month later, Nancy gets a text from his wife, we're going. I said, Pastor, make it simple. We're only coming for a few days, 3 or 4 days. We don't need to stay with you, but you need to help us arrange an Airbnb. They're all over the world that will work for us. We don't need to sightsee. We're willing to. We don't need to. We just want to lay our eyes on you and talk to you and just see how you're doing. They went, and it went very, very well. Not taking the credit, just, I put there that most men, in my notes at least, I don't know in yours, most mission trips are sanitized. They're not the real thing. They're just not. Number 7, we need to vet mission boards for their understanding of and training about third culture kids. And it's not enough to say to said mission board, do you minister to third culture kids? Because you know what they're going to say?
Of course we do. If the need arises.
Yeah, if the need arises, we do. We're prepared. And by the way, we often think our missionary, the one we sent from our church, isn't going to need it. They're a little cut above the rest. It's not enough to say. Number 8, and by the way, I don't want to, GFF is far from perfect. GFF, we have not added a new missionary for several years. Now we could. I say we could double. Rodney says we could triple. He gets paid the big bucks, so he's right. No, we're both supported by individuals and churches. Nobody gets paid. If GFF just said, well, look, we'll take all comers to do anything they want to do called missions, we'll take them to any country. You're a teacher, we'll take you. You're a pilot, we'll take you. You're a whatever, we'll take you. You have a motorcycle ministry, we'll take you. I'm not mocking any of that. It's not the gospel furthering fellowship. We're purely, exclusively looking for church planters. And there aren't a lot of people I think they're not answering. God's calling. Got to be calling. They're not answering. We were at Pensacola, Nancy and I. Rodney wasn't there with us. This was, I think, the last time we were there. She walks into the display room where we are. If you've ever been to PCC, you kind of know, or wherever you went to college. She walks into our display and goes like this. I want to be a missionary with GFF, but I can't. And we know what she means. I don't have to say why. I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, and by the way, her father is a veteran missionary known far and wide. She doesn't want to be with his board. Her brother is a missionary with another agency who raised his full support in like 16 or 18 months. She doesn't want to be a missionary with them. She said, no, I want to be with GFF, but I can't. I said, so there's one question. I got this all from Rodney. I said, is marriage in your future? She said, well, yeah, I hope so. I said, okay. All you have to do is pray that God will lead you to a husband that is she said, I know, a church planter. So, you know, we're focused on that. We believe a mission board should have a certain expertise in the area they say they do, rather than it's just in the list. And it sounds like I'm being unkind, but I'm not. So we need to vet mission boards for these things. Not just, oh yeah, we do missionary care, to describe to us. So we need to refer missionaries and their kids to Christian colleges that understand third culture kids. Boy, this is a big one. You know, just because it's a good Christian college does not mean it's a good fit for a third culture kid. I don't promote secular colleges, but not every Christian college is a good decision for a Christian kid. Well, I won't get into that, you know, because we want you to come back sometime. But you know what I'm trying to say. Especially third culture kids, somebody there needs to have their finger on these kids who grew up in another culture. You can seek out and vet and facilitate third culture kids to third culture kid debriefings. They're rare. I'm just going to read through there. Here's the one I'd really encourage you to do, Pastor. Long before missionaries visit your church, call the missionary and say, hey, Brother Jones, Brother Smith, you're going to be with us in 4 months for a Sunday. You're coming in on Saturday, leaving on Monday. I have a question for you. What could we do for your kids to make this a memorable visit? I'll guarantee you the answer. Oh, no, Pastor, whatever you do is great. Hold on, that's not what I mean. Like, do your kids want to rest? Do they want to play? Is there anything we shouldn't do? Yeah, don't ask them to come up front and sing. My kids don't sing. Missionary kids, most of them do not like being paraded. They like it when they're little. They hate it when they get a little older and realize they were paraded. But if you said, what can we do to make this memorable for your kids? Like for me, like I'm here in just outside Orlando. Like what could I do? I hate to say the big D word, the big Disney World, because it's very expensive. But if he said, well, Pastor, I'll tell you, my kids don't do a lot of things, but if we could spend one day at Disney World, it would make it memorable. Listen, they have 2, 3 kids, we're talking a minimum of $500. But if you did it a year ahead of time or whatever, just something to make it memorable, the kids won't forget it, they won't. Number 11, provide a financial gift to returning missionaries designated for clothing at each furlough. These are just suggestions. Rodney can shop in the thrift store. I'm sure his wife can shop in the thrift store. Loves it. And she's taught her daughters to shop in the thrift store. But there's nothing worse than being a teenage girl, third culture kid, and wondering if your clothes fit in.
That's what I'm told.
Yeah, that's what I'm told. Exactly, that's what I'm told. They don't need to have, it doesn't have to be fancy. But what a gift to say to a missionary, look, when you get home, I've talked to your sending pastor. I've talked to him. You said you're getting in on October 1st. Okay, by the time you get there, your pastor, or through your mission board, is going to have a check for $500. And I'm just throwing the idea. And look, you might say, Chris, you lost your mind. $500 is a lot of money for our church. It might not be over 12 months if people could feel why you're talking about this. Just to buy those kids 2 or 3 church outfits to take them through furlough. And I would tell them, you might not agree with this, I would say, listen, don't buy play clothes that are going to fit your kids when you go back to the field. I'm talking about clothes that will take them through furlough for Sundays so they can look like everybody else's kids. Now, if he spent it on play clothes, I wouldn't get mad at him, but you know what I'm saying. A birthday card and greeting card ministry, great. Pastor, really easy to do. You can buy greeting cards in bulk. You can buy forever international stamps. Did you know that? You have to find out of the country they're going to and a birthday. So you put the cards out there and you say, look, these are our missionaries are having a birthday in 2 months from now. You have to communicate with the missionary, get it figured out. Once you get it figured out, it's easy to do. It doesn't take much. And just sign your name. Mr. Jones, Mr. Smith, blah, 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 blah. Happy birthday, Mariah, blah, 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 blah. And then off they go. Do you know why I said 2 months? Because I think the most important thing is they get there before the event. They'll appreciate a birthday card anytime. But the birthday card that gets there before the birthday, because they know somebody had to figure this out. Like, this is all academic to them. I saw a post by a third culture kid, but her mother, a missionary kid that grew up in Africa, put a post on Facebook, nothing to do with me, it was just unsolicited. It was about receiving greeting cards as a missionary kid. I'm just reading it. And she said, and I have saved every one. Means a lot to them. Simple, but vetting resources, and praying for those missionary kids by name. All just suggestions. Pastor, you don't have to, what am I trying to say? You don't have to do the $1 million thing to encourage TCKs. You could do the $10 thing and do it well. Just do it well. Do the greeting card thing well. Learn to do it well. There's a book out there called Mind the Gaps. The best book on local church missionary care that we've come across. When you read it, it's going to discourage you. You're going to say, we could never do all this for our missionaries. You don't have to. You have to pray for something to do. God, show us just one thing we could do to make a difference in the life of a third culture kid. However you, Lord, do that, we'll do that one thing. We try to do that one thing well, and God will honor you for it. Because these third culture kids are the most likely group of new missionaries, right? But sadly, many of them are not having it. They're not having it. And maybe it's a hard thing for them. Could be. But maybe it's because their experience for them, wasn't good. Now, my time's beyond.